This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Xcast. As ever, the truth is in here. I am your host for this episode, Carl Sweeney, and welcome back to I Want to Believe Minute, which is our series unpicking the second X-Files movie. We're doing it 1 minute at a time. The reason we're doing that, I think, is because we did the same for Fight the Future a few years ago, and it just allows us to have a really deep forensic look at the movie in a way that you wouldn't normally do, I don't think. So we're at minute 65, running from 64 minutes 0 seconds, and this starts with FBI agents who are driving to the offices of the suspect. The minute goes through to 64 minutes 59 seconds, and right at the end of the minute, I think we're looking at an elevator door opening, inside which stands Callum Keith Rennie's character. Clara Jean Cook is with me once again. Hello, Clara.
Hello, Carl.
You know, we're, the third episode of we're doing 7 minutes together, aren't we, in this block? So this is moving on to a new phase, I think, in a way, isn't it? Because, we've seen Mulder being driven away from the previous scene, and now we're sort of getting to the more intensive stuff, I suppose, the more action-heavy chase is about to come. Before we get going properly on this minute, a quick reminder that you can follow us on social media, on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook, our basement group, for example. If you're enjoying the show, please consider dropping us a quick 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, Clara, so a couple of things going on here, because it involves kind of cross-cutting, doesn't it, between what's going on with Mulder, and he's with Dakota Whitney, and then cutting to and back from what Agent Drummy and co are up to with their search of the building. So, and then actually also later in the minute we see a van, don't we? There's muffled kind of barking coming from the van, so presumably this is the suspect turning up at the scene. Mulder and Whitney then, so she says to him, I think, let these men do their jobs. And then the other men go in, the other agents go in. Mulder says something to her about, I don't need a sweet talk. And she's sort of talking about how she wants to have a longer conversation. So what do you make of, what do you think she's saying here? What do you think is going on?
So Mulder is upset because I think Mulder thought that Father Joe was a psychic, believed him. And he's upset because I think he feels he's been duped. Because now they know that Father Joe has a connection to one of the suspects, it's feeling like that maybe Father Joe is just feeding them information, or that he's somehow involved in the whole case. Right? So how could he be a psychic if, although there's no evidence of that either. I mean, but anyway. And so Whitney's, I think, basically trying to reassure him. And that's why he's saying, I don't need to be sweet-talked. And, she's preventing him from going in the building. He's a civilian. He keeps seeming to forget that he's a civilian. He's not an FBI agent. He's not law enforcement. And I think it would probably be bad to have a civilian going in and searching, because it would probably discredit stuff that later happens in court, if there was a court case or a criminal case brought forward. So maybe she's trying to occupy him. I also wondered if she was. I mean, I feel like she in this sort of scene she reveals that she's a fan. That she saw
of Mulder's.
Mulder's. She took a look at his work, and I sort of feel there was something else going on here, which is that, more than just this case, she's actually, read through some of his X-Files, or she's read through some of his work, or she just, she seemed like a fan. And not flirting with him, but, flattering his ego, maybe slightly, or she's trying to make a connection with him. Then she sort of says, we'll talk about this later, or that's a bigger conversation. She obviously wants to have a bigger conversation with him. And I was like, what? Over coffee? Is this a professional capacity? What's going on here? But as soon as she says that, I sort of was like, well, you're not going to have any other conversations. That's also a flag. That's also a, in movies, it's quite cliched when somebody says, oh, we'll talk about this later. We'll talk about this when you get home, and you're like, that person's never coming home. Like,
yeah, if you know it's an expendable character, you're like, oh my god, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, they're gonna die on the way back home, you know. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation because like, why even put it in there? Like, what was she going to say to him? What kind of conversations were they going to have? Like, were they going to work together? Was she going to hire him as a consultant? Were they going to be friends? Is she like, I don't know, coming on to him? I mean, it didn't seem like she was coming on to him, but there is something in there that's put in there, I think, you know, like, because at one point, is it in the previous scene or something, she says something and Scully kind of, or maybe it's earlier in the movie, she says stuff and Scully cuts across her, and they are sort of pitching her and Scully to kind of be, I don't know, like rubbing each other the wrong way, and not adversarial, but almost kind of, you know,
one or two little hints of things. And there's the scene, I think I mentioned it on the previous episode somewhere, but when Mulder's shaved off his, he's got the beard of despair at the start of the movie, hasn't he? And then
the beard of despair.
Yeah, because it's kind of a shorthand, isn't it? If a character's like grown a beard, it's like, oh my god, what's going on? But he shaves it off, and then I think when he turns up at one of the like the crime scenes or something like that, where Dakota Whitney kind of touches his face, like, what have you done? You cut yourself shaving, kind of thing. So there are one or two little weird interactions between them, I think.
I think in the X-Files, whenever there's a woman who is professional, like she says, she's an FBI agent, or she's a scientist, or a doctor, or psychologist, or whatever, like she's in a professional capacity, and she believes Mulder almost outright, and she's interested in Mulder's opinion, and she seems like supportive of Mulder's theories, that rubs Scully the wrong way.
So which women are you
like? I'm thinking about. I mean, isn't there a episode to do with a dog, Alpha? Is that?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit more overt than this, but I'm sure there's other episodes where a woman will sort of say, will agree with Mulder, and it's like, because I guess there always is this idea, like, maybe Mulder's could get sick of having someone question him all the time. I don't think I think he enjoys that part of the relationship that he has with Scully. But, like, in this film, it doesn't seem that as much, does it?
I mean, this one seems a bit harder to discern exactly what's going on with her, I think. And part of me likes that because it's like the Alpha example that you mentioned, I don't think is a particularly well-written episode or character.
No, yeah. Or
well-performed character. So I'm glad that it's not as inelegant as that episode is, and at the same time I'm sort of wondering exactly what's being conveyed sometimes, but we've talked about that with the movie as a whole, haven't we, that it sometimes doesn't join all those dots in the way that you might expect, and maybe that's just another facet of it, that there are these kind of weird exchanges, or not weird exchanges, but these exchanges between Mulder and Whitney where there are things being unsaid and we're not exactly sure what they are.
And I think it's also because you contrast the other FBI agents' reactions to Mulder versus Whitney.
As in Drummy.
Yeah. Like Whitney brings them in.
Yeah.
Mulder in. Whitney seems to kind of trust Mulder. She seems to believe Mulder, and it's contrasted with Drummy and I suppose the other FBI agents in the room when they first go to the court headquarters. I mean, it just, do you know what I mean? Like, they're setting her up as like a believer, aren't they, really? Even though it's all sort of subtly done and it's all very temporary.
Well, like you say, it's going to be very temporary for Dakota Whitney going forward.
Sorry, Dakota.
Sorry for anyone who
Bad times.
Doesn't know that and is really fond of that character. One thing I was going to ask you, Clara, is that there's an exchange between Chris Carter and Frank Spotnitz on the audio commentary where some of this stuff that we're talking about in this minute was the very first night of filming. And, of course, Carter talks about how that was very, exciting, but also kind of a nervous time for him and for them. And Spotnitz says something about how he knew there was a problem because very soon after the first night of filming, there were photos and videos circulating online about, what had been filmed, basically. And I can't remember any of that because just at that time, I think I was either away at university or just after university, and our son was on the way and just wasn't really plugged into the X-Files fan base at that time. Can you remember any of the kind of build-up to I Want to Believe from back in the day? Were you really paying attention?
No. When did this film come out?
Came out 2008, summer 2008. So I guess when he's talking about stuff circulating online, it's probably the year before, you would guess. probably 2007.
So I would have been working at that point. I graduated university in 2004, so I was working. I mean, to be honest, 2008 wasn't really a great year for me. Like, in my early 20s, I was working really hard. I was being overworked, really, in a job. And I do remember seeing the film, but I think I just was kind of checked out at that point from... And also, 2008, people think about the internet like as if it's always existed the way it exists now. And it hasn't, obviously. And in 2008, I think was the year I joined Facebook. And I didn't have a smartphone. I wasn't using the internet in the same way that I use the internet now. There was no such thing as Tumblr or Twitter. Well, I mean, there may have been Twitter, but I wasn't on Twitter. I do not recall Instagram at that time. I mean, I'm sure Instagram existed probably, but I wasn't. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. I can't remember. I wasn't on it. I didn't have a smartphone, so, I had a mobile, but not a smartphone. And I don't remember being online and as much and looking at the X-Files online as much. I would say that, so any sort of spoilers and stuff I probably would have seen in a newspaper, I imagine a physical newspaper, or on television, I guess. And I don't recall seeing any of that. So
yeah. I mean, for our younger listeners, newspapers, they were these things you would buy that would tell you the news that happened the previous day. You would read page after page. No, you're right, actually, thinking back on it, because, sometimes we had these things like Facebook that we think of, but the way we engaged with a lot of that stuff was very different. Like, I remember vividly, I'll bring this back to X-Files, but like the 2010 general election, I remember there was I'm sure you remember this, Clara, but there was a very infamous exchange between the Prime Minister and this voter in Rochdale, where he went back in the car afterwards and was caught on microphone calling her a bigoted woman. And what I remember is I'd been at work that day, and the first I heard about this massive news thing breaking out, which everybody was talking about, was I walked past this billboard which had like the local evening newspapers, like headline for the day was like PM in bigoted voters row or something. Like, these days, a few years after that, the way you would find out about a story like that is you would probably hear about it within minutes of it happening through a BBC News alert on your phone or whatever. And we just weren't finding stuff out in the same way back in 2010 in that example. The X-Files example is a very good one, I think, because although there would have been people who were really plugged into what was being circulated online, I think on this podcast there are a lot of fans who, in that period, weren't engaging with the show in the same way, and we never stopped being fans of the X-Files, but it was very different for me, like that period, the run-up to 2008 and the release of this movie, compared to like the revival and the run-up to the revival, 2015 to 2016, where I was... Yeah. There was stuff on Twitter, like the 201 Days of the X-Files daily viewings, and all sorts of things that made you a bit more of an active participant in some of that in a way. And
like X-Files memes and stuff, and fans. I mean, in the previous era, fans were like creating videos for YouTube and fan vids, and I mean, we're not going to go into talking all about sort of. Transformative fandom and the way the material that fans produce, which is all very creative and varied and broad, but people have been doing that since the 60s for lots of different, well, before that even, since for lots of different shows and books and novels and everything and fandoms. I feel like the era of creating sort of like memes and images and stuff to do with the X-Files, there was a lot of that came out right before the revival, like people posting stuff online and
but like it's interesting though, isn't it, that that's actually a relatively short space of time between like 2007 and 8 to 2015 16, but the culture, the fan culture kind of had changed a lot in that period, and how you I think there was participate.
Also a new audience as well, so some of the people that I saw online were younger than me and hadn't watched the X-Files when it originally ran on TV, and they were now watching it ahead of the revival, and they, it was like they were seeing it for the first time. And for them, it seemed kind of retro, whereas for me, I was like, well, I remember the 90s and the early 2000s. Like, this isn't, I mean, of course it's retro, but it's kind of also nostalgic and comforting. And for some people, it's not really nostalgic because they never watched it initially when it was first on. They were too young. So with each, I mean, the revival was really good in getting a whole load of new viewers, I think. And it was fun to see what they were saying, what they were thinking, because some of the reactions that they had to the X-Files, you know, they hadn't watched the whole series yet, and they were watching season 1, and they were like, what is going on? Why is there no lights? Why is everything filmed in the dark? What? You know, what is this thing between Scully and Mulder? And I'm like, just wait till you get to, like, season 7, is what I'm saying. And then someone's like, oh my God, Scully's been abducted! What? And I'm like, just wait. So yeah, it was really fun to sort of see a whole bunch of new people discovering the show.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so funny. You seem to get people online every so often. They'll pop up like they're watching the X-Files for the first time, and they'll be on like, I don't know, season 1, episode 15 or something, and like, oh my God, will these two just get together already? And you're like, okay, well, you're going to have a little bit of a wait, actually.
Yeah, you've got to be patient.
Yeah, be patient.
One thing I did want to ask is, if this was the first scene that was filmed, Mulder doesn't have a beard. So did they make David Duchovny grow a beard, or is that a fake beard?
I believe it's a fake beard.
Okay.
I think I heard that on the commentary track relating to a previous minute. Yeah.
Because I thought it really looked like a real beard. I thought it was a real beard.
It looks good, doesn't it? Yeah. No, I think it is fake though, unfortunately.
Okay.
The other thing was that Chris Carter said that because it was the first night of filming, he brought in the man who sings the Canadian and American national anthem at certain sports games to do the same for the crew of the movie as kind of a gesture that, you know, it would be the anthem will be sung just before you start the game. So it's kind of like, you know, we're getting underway, so we're going to sing the national anthem. So I won't get into a big tangent about national anthems, facts about national anthems, because we did actually talk a little bit about the Canadian national anthem with Tony on the previous episode, so I don't want to revisit old ground. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say goodbye to Clara for this episode. I'm going to say that we will both be back once again for minute 66, which is coming very soon indeed. And until then, listeners, always remember, trust no one.